is the Bloody Disgusting Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking Chekhov's Snails and Stairs. We're talking brown rice and vegetables. And we're talking different places. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace. And we're talking I used to love Doggy Chow. We're talking Showgirls, everybody. Surprise!
Yes, this is absolutely not a horror film. And yet here we are still covering it on its 25th anniversary.
Yes, but I will have you know that the clue I gave last week in our Urban Legends Final Cut episode is that it is referred to as a horror movie in a different horror movie. And that movie is, what is it, Joe?
It's Scream 2, but it's not referred to as a horror film. It's just referred to as absolutely horrifying.
Well, okay, but the Ghostface asked Randy, what's your favorite scary movie? And he goes, Showgirls, absolutely horrifying.
Right. Okay,
so
I'll allow it.
Oh god, yeah. So this movie, Joe. Oh fuck it. I don't even want to get too far into it because I got to bring our guest in because I feel like we're all gonna have so many things to say.
So many things to say.
Well, just like this movie, obviously, which crams every possible plot point you could imagine into its 131-minute runtime. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, she is a black, queer, abstract artist living in Los Angeles, California, but you may also know her as one of the co-hosts of the spectacular Attack of the Queerwolf podcast. Please welcome Nay Bever.
Hi.
How you doing, Nay? How's life?
I'm good. I mean, you know, it's crazy out here. It's crazy out here and crazy in here.
Mm-hmm.
I am okay and hanging in there for sure. And, you know, doing what we do. So.
And you're here to talk Showgirls.
Oh my God, I feel so lucky right now.
It's definitely an odd man out for episodes. I mean, we have covered Jawbreaker before, so that was also kind of an odd man out. So it's not like it's the first non-horror movie we've ever covered, but yeah, it's Joe practically begged me to do it.
I really, really did, yeah. So this was originally the time slot for Candyman, and then it kept getting moved, and I kept telling Trace, if Candyman gets moved one last time off of this time slot, it is Showgirls' 25th anniversary, and I am forcing us to do this. And the funny thing is I was like casually thinking, who would be a fun guest for this? And I reached out to you, expecting you to be like, I am not watching that trash or talking to you about it. And you were in immediately.
Now, hold on. Because Nay, okay, yeah, let's go with this because obviously this movie was considered trash when it came out, and people obviously really they started liking it in the 90s, like on video, but this movie has a huge fan base. Like, it's called a cult film, but I mean, honestly, I think it's like outgrown cult status and just become like a film people love.
I mean, it's fucking amazing, so I don't know. But I've always thought that.
Do you remember when you first saw this movie, Nay?
Yeah, I don't remember whose house I was spending the night at, but I was just like awake later than everybody and caught it on, I don't know if it was Cinemax or Showtime or Stars. Right. You know, someone had like a free weekend of something and I got lucky.
Oh no.
Yes.
Well, for our current listeners, if you haven't seen the film, shame on you. But it is streaming on HBO Max for quote-unquote free. And obviously you have to have a subscription to HBO Max. Or you can just go buy the Blu-ray for like $10 on Amazon. But you should watch this movie and you should support it.
If only because this is the kind of film that quite literally will never get made again. This is very much a product of its time. So this came out in 1995. This is Paul Verhoeven at his peak. This is Joe Esterhaus at his peak. This is when adult erotic thrillers were having their heyday. Like, these two men were on top of the world, and then they made Showgirls, and everything changed.
Well, Verhoeven, yes. I don't know if I would say the same thing about Esterhaus, because I kept thinking that he had done this right after Basic Instinct, and while Paul Verhoeven did, Esterhaus did have one more film between Showgirls and Basic Instinct, and that would be the 1993 Sharon Stone classic, Sliver.
Also covered on this podcast.
Well,
in our editorial series, yeah. Nay, have you seen Sliver?
Yes. 100%.
I think y'all covered it, didn't you?
No, we did Basic Instinct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sliver's, it's weird, right? So you go from like Basic Instinct to Sliver to this to Jade. Like that's Esterhaus's trajectory in Hollywood.
Yes, that is what we shall call it, a trajectory.
Because we'll just go ahead and dive into like how this movie came to be kind of now. I do want to point out to listeners though, so we can only fit so much of the production into the beginning of this episode. So if you want a really good deep dive into like the thing that is Showgirls, really, you should really check out Jeffrey McHale's documentary, You Don't Know Me. And of course, that is Nomi, Nomi, just like the character, because it's a fantastic documentary on this bizarre little film.
Yeah, it's absolutely my favorite documentary that I've seen in the last 2 years. So I would highly recommend it for folks who even have like a passing interest in the cultural legacy of this film.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, let's get the show to the road. So, fresh off of Sliver, he reteams with Paul Verhoeven. He comes up with the idea for the movie, like just the general idea, which I don't really know what that entails, but like just in his home, he's like, what if we did this? He gets lunch with Verhoeven, who's like, oh, I've always loved those big MGM musicals, and I've always wanted to make one. So they were like, cool, Showgirls. Like, that's just kind of what happened. So he wrote the idea on a napkin, and he was advanced $2 million to write the script. Before even like anything was written, he had the concept for the film. And because of his success with Basic Instinct, MGM was like, here you go, fucker, let's do it. And then he got an additional $1.7 million when the studio actually produced it into a film. So they read the script, said, this is filmable, and gave him more money.
I guess they didn't read the script because some of this dialogue is choice.
Yes. And we can debate at length about whether it is intentionally comedy or not, because neither Esterhaus nor Verhoeven's can seem to agree on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of discrepancies in the stories that they've told over the years.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, but basically this money deal made him the highest paid screenwriter in Hollywood history at the time. Now, they did do their due diligence. They went and they interviewed over 200 strippers. They incorporated parts of their stories into the film. I would argue that they maybe had a few too many stories that they incorporated into the screenplay.
What, you don't think Julie and Annie's story needed to be told? You don't think that the strippers who had to deal with chimps who were shitting garlic on the stage had to be told? Come on.
Oh my God.
Like, those kids needed to get cussed out. That was important.
Oh my God. I was 100% fan of you. If you are a stripper, please do not bring your children to work. And also, if they look like Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy, leave them at home.
Oh, wow.
It's really funny to like watch this film with a critical eye, because again, in the past, I've only really watched it for shits and giggles, as most people do. So many of my notes were in all caps.
Yeah. Like, what is this decision? Who thought this was okay?
I mean, there are way worse places for kids to go with their parent to work. I wish that I had had that opportunity as a kid. to go to any part of the strip club.
But that's a scene too where like you can see the comedy peeking out, right? Because she has her kids around all these titties, but then she's so worried about the other stripper saying fuck in front of her kids. Like that is funny no matter which way you film it or deliver it. I don't even know. So yeah, this is a high profile film. I mean, they were seeking out top profile actors and actresses for this film. For Nomi, you've got Pamela Anderson, Angelina Jolie, Jenny McCarthy, Denise Richards. Charlize Theron apparently desperately wanted this role. That is from Paul Verhoeven, like directly.
It's one of those like classic stories where it's like Charlize Theron probably wouldn't have the career that she has now had she gotten this role.
Well, do you know what she got to do instead when she didn't get this film?
It was 2 Days in the Valley. Is that around the same time?
It comes out, I think that comes out the next year. No, okay. What came out 2 weeks before Showgirls, is an uncredited role by Charlize Theron in the direct-to-VHS sequel, Children of the Corn 3.
Oh, yes. Okay. I do remember Brennan talking about that when he did his deep dive into the Children of the Corn franchise.
But it's kind of fascinating, right, though? Because, like, I'm sure that for her was like, oh my god, I have missed out on this huge chance in Hollywood.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And now she's Charlize. Look where she is compared to where Elizabeth Berkley is.
Which just goes to show you there's no shame in doing a direct-to-video horror sequel because you could end up as Jennifer Aniston or Charlize Theron.
Jennifer Aniston was in a theatrical horror release, not a direct-to-video VHS sequel. Leprechaun, please.
I mean, Leprechaun plays. You just said it yourself.
That's fair. But no, apparently their top choice was Drew Barrymore. I think because she had just done Poison Ivy in 1992, she actually turned down the role because she was uncomfortable with the nudity in the film.
Yeah. Everyone should become uncomfortable with the nudity in this film because it is...
Why?
I find that this film doesn't present bodies in an attractive way. That's my issue with it. Like, the people in it are clearly attractive, and I don't think they're framed in a way that makes them sexy.
I don't know if I would... I really think that Verhoeven directed the performers to behave unsexily. And unfortunately, I am speaking specifically about Berkley, which we'll get to that in a minute. I mean, because we all think about the sex scenes, right? Or like the lap dance scene. I mean, Nay, by all means, say your piece on this.
Just like, it just sounds like some men who don't like women talking about this. That's all it sounds like. I'm like, I don't know. As a woman attracted to women, I think everyone's fine as hell. I could watch Gina Gershon and Elizabeth Berkley do anything.
Yes.
All day, every day.
But don't you find that they're more attractive in the scenes where they have clothes on as opposed to clothes off?
Definitely, like the sexual tension between those two happens when they're like clothed, really. Like they're performing otherwise.
Right.
And so, no, I don't think like necessarily though the moments of nudity are meant to be like really sexy and hot as part of the story, but I think those women look good as hell, so it is like at a baseline.
I will agree with that 100%.
I'm not disputing that the women are attractive. I don't think that's the issue there, because yes, I mean, Gina Gershon is Gina Gershon, and Elizabeth Berkley is Elizabeth Berkley. And it's interesting because Gershon would go on to do Bound the next year after this movie came out. So,
right,
hottest movie of
so good.
Of some time, you know. So hot.
So basically, they Berkley came on because Saved by the Bell got canceled in like May '93. So she's like, okay, cool, let's do it. This movie is supposed to be her big break. Like, I think Verhoeven even said that like she thought she was transitioning from a teen favorite to the next Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
I mean, like, she was training 16 hours a day in high heels while doing the dance scenes. Like, she put a lot of effort into this film. So she got that.
Mm-hmm.
Then for Crystal, Madonna was the top choice for that. They'd also wanted Sharon Stone, Sean Young, Daryl Hannah. Madonna, though, and this is the funny thing for me. So Madonna had just done Body of Evidence, which was also a big Razzie winner and also had a really like hard MPAA battle to get an R rating versus the NC-17. So I wonder if the subject matter for this was like, that's too much of the same thing.
Probably. I mean, she was constantly being cast in this like femme fatale role because like she had also done Dick Tracy. So I wonder if Madonna was like, I'm just tired of being the sexy actress. Like, I'll just do that on my own when I go on tour and get paid way more money for that.
Yeah, I mean, and then she would go on to do Evita like a year after this. So I'm sure that she was fine.
Hi, I'll just take that Oscar.
So yeah, they filmed this movie from August to December of 1993. The NC-17 rating that this film has was it was not intentional, supposedly. It was only given that after being screened by the MPAA. So like Paul Verhoeven didn't set out to do it. So when it came down to either cut the film or do the NC-17, which obviously MGM was like, we can't do that. Paul Verhoeven made a deal that was unheard of at the time. He said he would basically have complete creative freedom, which I'm assuming would mean final cut approval?
Probably.
Get the NC-17 rated movie, but it would require him to give up 70% of his $6 million salary if the film was not a success. Yeah, he would only get the rest of it if it was a success.
Yikes.
So that happened.
Okay, so when you hear those kinds of stories, though, you must then think he had full confidence in this, because you're not going to give up that kind of money for the rating unless you really think you're either making great art or you're looking at it thinking there's no way this doesn't succeed. Like, he must have thought it was going to be huge.
I think everyone involved. I mean, this movie was projected to do big money, and the press around the NC-17 was, again, like it was the widest release for an NC-17 film. I think it was like 1,200 theaters, and it was supposed to be a huge thing. And again, an Oscar contender.
Yeah. Well, because people compared this, like if you go back, I alerted you to this, Trace. Sorry, Nay, I didn't alert you to this, but if you look at Roger Ebert's review, he compares this to All About Eve, which is an Oscar-winning film in multiple categories. Like, people thought that this was going to be a Las Vegas version of All About Eve.
Yeah, and I guess it's that. So, so yeah, this is released in theaters on September 22nd, 1995 by MGM. Again, a runtime of 2 hours and 11 minutes with a budget of $45 million, which again, that's about $90 million in 2020 dollars. It opens in the number 2 slot with $8.1 million. And Joe, you and I just recorded our Copycat episode. This is another film that was bested by the movie Seven, because this was also Seven's opening weekend, which opened in the number 1 slot with $14 million.
Right.
This goes on to gross $20.4 million, making it essentially a financial flop. When this happened, when it tanked opening weekend, Esterhaus, he took out an ad in Variety urging female moviegoers to go see the film because it highlighted the exploitations that lap dancers are subjected to.
Wow. Okay. That's an angle.
He publicly blamed the studio for their cheap marketing tricks, their titillation, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, that's that. I mean, it got 7 Golden Raspberry Award nominations. Verhoeven has always said that the film's comedy was unintentional. However, Esterhaus has gone on record saying it was. Speaking specifically, how do you not find the line, how does it feel not to have anybody coming on you anymore? Like, how do you not find that funny? But I feel like over the past 25 years, both of them have gone back and forth in their stories on this. So fortunately, there's not really anyone to blame.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, neither one of them were to blame because they were men, so it all basically fell on Elizabeth Berkley.
She was dropped by her agent after this film came out. She couldn't get a job. No one would hire her. She was essentially a Hollywood pariah. Meanwhile, Paul Verhoeven gets $70 million to make Starship Troopers after this.
Yeah. But there's no such thing as sexism in Hollywood.
No, not at all. Luckily for the film, I guess, this goes on to make a substantial amount of money on home video, I guess, sales and rentals. They released it the day after Christmas on VHS in 1995. Of course, Blockbuster and Hollywood Video get your R-rated cuts, and then, you can buy the NC-17 cut on like a VHS or Laserdisc at the time. It earns over $100 million on video rentals and became one of MGM's top 20 all-time bestsellers.
So hang on. This is not surprising to me, and I think it actually foretells the way that people have transitioned to consuming pornography in their houses, right? This isn't a film that you want to go and be titillated in a big theater, right? Like, that's dirty movie territory. Yeah, but provide people the opportunity to watch it at home and maybe enjoy it and be able to express that joy in whatever way, shape, or form. And I think it makes a lot more sense. I don't want to say that we shouldn't see R-rated or even NC-17 films on the big screen, but I think you're always going to run into this roadblock where people are going to say, well, particularly if it's sexy content, I'd rather see it at home.
But that's why, Nay, you saying that you watch this maybe on Cinemax or something, I was like, that makes sense.
Right. It makes so much sense.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you get to watch this movie somewhere you can masturbate, but I would still watch it at a drive-in. Yeah, I mean, especially as a kid. As a child, this movie was so good for that because you got to, like, see crisp, clear titties everywhere. just everywhere.
And vaginas.
No blurred, yes. Okay, no blurred Channel 99. No sneaking into like your brother's dad's bathroom, like to see his Playboy. None of that. It's just right there.
The blurred channel, it's like the green and pink hues
Yeah.
that are just like squiggling around on the screen.
Oh, see, mine were always blue.
Every once in a while, you get like a crystal clear negative image.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh my God, there it is. There it is.
All the young kids are listening, like not understanding what we're talking about.
Yeah, they're like, what? I could just pull it up on my cell phone.
Right. I'll do it right now.
That was right. Let me turn this off. Okay. Yeah.
I will say that the VH1 eventually bought the TV rights to this, and so they basically did a censored version where, and I guess this is either the late 90s or the early 2000s, they digitally insert black bras and panties onto all the breasts and vaginas. And then there were several scenes that were removed entirely. Like, I'm assuming the lap dance scene was probably removed entirely.
Can you imagine them trying to like digitally put like a black bra and panty on Elizabeth Berkley as she's giving Kyle MacLachlan that lap dance?
Like late 90s CGI trying to like match her motions or flailing around.
Flailing is exactly what she is real good at.
Yes.
My husband and I were at a pool. Well, not recently. It was before COVID, but there was like a little waterfall type thing. And he just looks at it and points at it and goes, it's like Showgirls.
Yeah.
I want to know how many people have suffered back injuries trying to replicate her moves. Because these are not amateur moves, people.
They are not. You're going to pull something.
Well, I will say, though, that pool sex, I would advise against it in every shape, way, or form. I mean, granted, I'm talking exclusively with gay sex. I don't know if vaginal sex works differently in the pool, but the water dries you out. That is just my experience.
There are gay people with vaginas. And when
I'm sorry. Gay, male-to-male gay sex. That is where I'm coming from with that.
I think there are also some men with vaginas.
Damn it!
Who are having sex. Yeah.
You could just say dick and butt, Trace.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Dick and butt
I am speaking exclusively from dick and butt sex. With that experience.
Yeah, I mean, again, water sex is not for amateurs. You can have a lot of bad stuff happen. Yeah. So you need to know what you're doing, and it doesn't just involve a dolphin fountain and some green neon tree lights.
Yeah, it's definitely not what the sex you should have every day. But I wouldn't turn it down. You know what I mean? It's like I'm gonna try it. Like if we have to stop, that's fine. But I'm gonna try it. We're gonna see if it works for a little bit.
I mean, I think you also have to be positioned genitals to genitals and not like genital to belly, like upper belly area.
Yeah, there's some questionable logistics going on here, for sure.
Anyway, so, okay, yeah, everyone is embarrassed by this film. It makes so many top 10, like, worst or bottom 10 lists, whatever. MGM is clearly embarrassed. But they start to notice that the reason that the video is performing well, the VHS, is because, like, 20-somethings are having watch parties with this. They're renting it and showing it to friends, watching it ironically. This film eventually achieves a cult status to the point that it's shown as a midnight movie with the likes of Rocky Horror Picture Show or The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. And it's gone on to even receive a critical evaluation where some people think it's a genuine, serious satire, intentional satire of Hollywood or just fame in general.
Yeah. And I will attest that I personally subscribe to that. Like, I think there's a lot of ridiculousness, particularly in Esterhaus's script. But if you look at the way it's plotted, this film is very much a treatise on how bodies, but particularly women's bodies, are bought and sold by rich men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about that. End the episode.
I don't argue that you can read that from the film. I do argue that it was intentional, but as we've discussed many times, Joe, like intentionality doesn't matter. You watch a film, you read it away. That's what it is. So yeah, that's my say on the matter.
I think part of the problem is that, particularly like when you first watch the film, if you don't know about the legacy of it, like if you happen to go into this without any kind of foreknowledge, you would see that this film is populated by people who are giving wildly different performances. And some of them seem to be very sly and in the know. Like, I always argue that Gina Gershon walks out of this film mostly looking good because she seems to know what kind of movie she's in. Whereas people can say, oh, I have no fucking idea what Elizabeth Berkley is doing. Like, what was Verhoeven doing when he directed her? Because she acts like she is manic all the time. Like, even her motion, she is like full on hitting, aggressive, everything. And it's a very unusual performance. Like, it has been reappraised. But I think a lot of people, when you first go in, you're like, what is this woman doing?
So I have a quote from Verhoeven. And we don't have to dive too much into this because you don't know me does a good enough job of doing it, but I do want to read his quote. So he never really commented or stood up for her, to my knowledge, publicly until 2015 when he did an interview with the New York Daily News. And this is what he says. Showgirls certainly ruined the career of Elizabeth Berkley in a major way. It made my life more difficult, but not to the degree it did Elizabeth's. Hollywood turned their backs on her. If somebody has to be blamed, it should be me because I thought it was interesting to portray somebody like that. I had hoped the end of the movie would explain why she acted that way when it's revealed she has convictions linked with drugs, but that too turned out to be a big mistake. I asked Elizabeth to do all of that, to be abrupt and act in that way. I did consider that people would think that she had borderline personality, but that was because her character had a history of drug abuse, so I tried to express that through her abruptness.
Oof. Part of that apology is great, and another part of it is like, oh, well, if you're on drugs, then you must have a borderline personality disorder that makes you prone to aggression. Very judgy.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, the implications of conflating the two are bad enough, but I think my issue is that it just like, why are you saying this 20 years later? Like, I'm sure it was probably for some like 20th anniversary of Showgirls piece that this New York Daily News, that the New York Daily News was doing, but it's just like, why didn't you say that in 97 when you were handed $70 million to make Starship Troopers, which, by the way, I don't even think made its money back?
No, it's also a big failure, and that's one of the reasons why he left Hollywood. So it's like when his career was in having some problems, then it was like, okay, whatever, I'm done with this. But Elizabeth Berkley never even got that opportunity, right?
You forget, though, even after Starship Troopers, I think he was handed $90 million to make Hollow Man.
Oh God, right, Hollow Man. Previous episode on Patreon, go listen to our audio commentary. It's silly.
So yeah, I think it's really upsetting, and I do feel bad for her. I think she started to come around to the cults and like learning to kind of make fun of it and have fun with it. Like, she's attended screenings recently, so it's good for her. But you can't help but like feel that Hollywood sexism at work on her career.
Yeah,
and that's my spiel. So, Joe, your turn, Joe. What is Showgirls about? Please do try to tell us.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, typing some of this up was a little bit silly, so it reads a little funny, and I invite you to interject whenever you feel the need. So we open on Nomi Malone, Elizabeth Berkley. She is hitching a ride to Las Vegas from vulgar grifter Jeff, played by Dewey Weber, and he distracts her at a casino long enough to steal her suitcase.
Whoa. Hey,
it's a 2.5-hour movie, people. I do have to cut stuff out.
I know. And it's totally fine. I do want to point out that she is a force from the get-go. Like, I love that the movie doesn't waste time, and yet later it does. But like, we get the Showgirls title card like immediately. I think it's like what, a Paul Verhoeven film, Showgirls, bam. Open on her just fucking trucking it through this parking lot. And then I think one of her first lines is like, I don't like Garth Brooks. And there's this whole critique on Garth Brooks as a musician.
She's like jabbing the radio with her long nails.
She's a force to be reckoned with, this one.
I do love that when challenged, she just immediately opens a switchblade in this car.
Okay.
I would argue that some people probably think that it's necessary.
Absolutely. Of course. I'm not going to hitchhike without a piece. Like, are you kidding me? Yeah, no. No.
Well, and her instincts are correct because Jeff is clearly not to be trusted.
It's like with Nomi, you have this person who has really experienced a lot of trauma in their life. And I know sometimes it seems like that manifests in like these highly erratic, manic looking, you're like, girl, what are you thinking? What are you not thinking? But it's like, where did I read where they describe her as like street smart? And I was like, oh, that's like not exactly how I would describe what I would think of when I think of her.
Mm-hmm.
But she still has like these beautiful, incredible bimbo moments.
Mm-hmm.
But she's a trauma survivor, so she is vigilant. Like she's not gonna hitchhike without. She's gonna hitchhike because she wild, but she's not gonna do it without a switchblade.
I think that might be also part of the movie's failings is, we get so many of these extra subplots with James, the dancer guy, and
Oh, God.
obviously we'll talk about Molly's rape scene later, but like that's a whole thing that doesn't really need to exist. When they could have delved more again, if you're making like a legit Oscar film and you wanted like to go through like the satire in Hollywood of fame and like what it does to people and what people will do to become famous, but you have this character who, as you said, has suffered trauma. And it's trauma that is mentioned in a borderline throwaway line in the last 15 minutes of the film. There's no exploration of that trauma in this film outside of her performance.
No, and it's immediately then followed about the line that says, well, you must have low self-esteem because you're a fantastic fuck. Like, way to undermine what this woman has gone through and just make a flippant line about how much you sold your body for to literally survive. But sure. Let's make it a punchline.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's your straight man writing this movie.
This is true. But like, even in this opening scene when Nomi and Jeff are talking, he talks about how she's going to have to sell it or she's going to have to do something when she gets to Vegas, when he leaves her alone so that he can steal the suitcase and she's doing the silver dollars at the casino. There's a man who says, like, are you out of money? Do you want to just come up to my room? It'll only take 15 minutes. From the get-go, she is seen not just as an object of sexual desire, but also as a body that can be purchased by men. It's a through line that continues through literally every interaction that she has with men throughout the entire film, and some women.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is a lot of people's experience. A lot of people's real life experience.
But here's the weird thing, Nay. I would say that this is not the experience of men.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, that sounded very like, Nay, let me tell you.
Oh, no. I agree with you. Yes, it's mostly not men's problem. Yeah, that is probably not most men's experience.
But it's weird if you think about if the primary audience for this film is men. I worry that one of the reasons that this film didn't end up getting well received is because men went to see it and they saw her in the same way that all the male characters do. And it's like, well, you're not going to understand her trauma. You're not going to make an effort to relate to her because you are one of these terrible people.
Yeah, correct.
Mm-hmm. Not to say audiences are terrible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and I think that you're right that it's like they don't explore all of these things that she has survived. They don't explain how she has come to be so resilient, and they don't give her any credit for that.
I was just saying, but that's also like when you hear them saying, yeah, we went and interviewed 200 strippers and we got their personal stories, basically made like you could probably make a short story novella out of the stories they were getting. I do believe that the initial intent for Verhoeven, or maybe just Esterhaus, like maybe Esterhaus, when he says, oh, well, I really hated the marketing campaign, which was, doing the titillation, whereas like I was trying to tell women to go see this movie because of like what it's saying to women. But then maybe something got lost in the direction with Verhoeven. Or maybe they both really did think that this was serious, but that's why it's camp, right? It's just so unintentionally hilarious sometimes or received poorly. I don't know.
There's just so many scenes where you're like, I really don't know. Did they think that this was serious? Did they not see the camp or the comedy? And what was the takeaway for them? Like, I know we talked about intentionality, and it's always a bit of a subjective kind of loser's game to try to figure out what a filmmaker is aiming to do. But there are scenes in this movie where they are legitimately baffling. Like, what was happening here?
Yeah.
Yeah, like whose decision were those braids on
right.
What's her name? It's honestly the most astonishing thing in the film.
the marble dancer, the marble thrower.
Yes, when she lost her marbles, honey. Yes.
I have seen this movie so many times, and I've never noticed that after she throws the marbles and after we get the slow-mo fall of the dancer that she like destroys, there's like this shot of her being picked up and just smiling and like in a self-congratulatory way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
she looks like she's walking away, except she's being carried.
I mean, it tracks for like someone who would wear that hair. I'm like, you are really proud of yourself and you feel no shame when you should. So that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, is that cultural appropriation, that hair?
I mean, is that a white person?
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't,
yeah.
I don't know.
I don't
Oh,
either.
Julie. We'll have more to say about her later.
Julie, there you go.
I only know that because I had to write the plot recap.
I was calling her Braids the whole time.
Fair enough, yeah.
Correct. That is her name.
Okay, so Nomi has a minor conniption fit after realizing that her suitcase has been stolen. So she physically assaults a car and then she vomits. And at this point, she is partially comforted and also like, hey, get away from my car, you crazy lady. So this is where we get the introduction of Molly, who is played by Gina Rivera.
So there's obviously like lesbian undertones to this relationship here. And
Just a
again, I don't
touch.
know if this is choice. Well, because all I could keep thinking was because this is a part where they almost kiss, and I'm like, Molly, she just puked. Like, that is disgusting. But I also like, you're watching this show. Okay, well, who did this? Because it's female companionship. Of course, you can read queerness in this, but I also feel like it's teasing. Like, this is Paul Verhoeven teasing your male viewers. It's like, look, the girls might kiss, but not yet.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've often wondered, Nomi, she's not just a trauma survivor, but she's also, sounds terrible to say it this way, but she's an opportunist in the way that she can find a way to thrive in almost any situation, right? Like she can connect with virtually anybody, even though she's startlingly abrasive. People are drawn to her. So the first time you see the film, after they have the fries and she says different places and she freaks out, the cut to 6 weeks later when she's still staying at Molly's trailer is so like a what moment. But then you realize it's because Nomi can just get under people's skin and just stay there. Like she will find a way to survive.
Yeah, I'm proud of her for that. I'm so proud of her.
I have a question, and if okay, Molly's kind of presented because we have the white savior in a lot of like black stories, and it's almost kind of like Molly's presented as like the black savior for this white girl who's like down on her luck. Which of course, though, the film immediately walks back over the course of the film as Nomi rises and Molly, well, gets raped and continuously shit upon throughout the rest of the film.
I would actually argue that Molly has a trajectory that's similar to black characters in horror films, which is that she exists to serve the white protagonist story, and then she's the one who is punished or martyred as a result.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like there's always some too big of a heart black girl who puts up with some crazy white girl shit. Because like she's also kind of funny, you also kind of like her, but damn, she's crazy. Damn, But you're like, all right, this is my friend or whatever. And then
because that's the thing, right? I mean, like, you could technically remove Molly from the movie. You can have like someone help Nomi out to get in a trailer and find a place to live, but then she gets her own place. She goes to the audition by herself without having Molly as the end. Like, you don't quote unquote need the character, at least in the sense that this movie presents her, which is in the way that both of y'all are describing.
Yeah, I would say like as soon as she gets into the Stardust and meets Crystal, the Gina Gershon character, and we kind of get the lay of the land of what Goddess is all about. That's the floor show that she will eventually begin working on. At this point, you could hypothetically be like, she gets a job and then she can move out of Molly's trailer and we don't ever see Molly again. So yeah.
It's a frustrating trajectory for this character.
Oh, yeah. I unabashedly love this movie, but I've also repeatedly told people that if the rape scene was removed, this would be a perfect film because I just don't think it has a place. And so much of the rest of Showgirls is kind of like a joie de vivre. Like it's about watching this woman thrive and deceive people and succeed. And then we have this terrible downfall, but it's not to her. It's to the person who cares about her the most in the world.
Can you translate that French for me though?
Yeah, sure. Like it's a lust for life.
Okay.
Sorry.
I had to ask. I was just going to say it.
I'm like, I don't know what the fuck you're saying right now.
I didn't.
Okay, so we're briefly introduced to Zach Carey, who is played by Colin McLaughlin. He is
fresh off of the Flintstones.
Oh God, really?
Well, No, because I don't particularly find Kyle MacLachlan very attractive. I'm going to be totally honest, but I hate his hair in this movie. And I was like, where have I seen that hair before? And I think it's the exact same haircut he has in the Flintstones.
I do feel like he's been rocking that same hair for quite some time. Like after Twin Peaks, he's had this hair for nearly his entire life.
Yeah, sure.
It's period. It's vintage. That's what it is. So he is briefly introduced. I do love the throwaway lines of the other people who were considered for the Crystal Connors position in this show. So we could have had LaToya, we could have had Suzanne, and it's like I'm just imagining 18-year-olds watching this movie and being like, I don't know who those people are.
Well, that's because later we could have had Janet Jackson or Paula Abdul flashing their titties all over the stage. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
You wish.
I do sometimes think of Paula Abdul in the Crystal Connors role and think about what this movie would be like.
Oh, hot. Oh, I would definitely watch Elizabeth Berkley and Paula Abdul flirt. Oh my God. 100%.
Fair.
I'm there for it.
Fair.
I love it.
Paula gives her hat at the end and she fucking wears that shit into the sunset before she fucks up that man who stole her shit. Yes. Yes. I want it now.
That scene with the hat is iconic for sure.
I love it.
It is really good. So at this point, Nomi embarrasses Molly in front of Crystal because Nomi is sensitive about her job at dancing at the Cheetah, a local topless lounge.
I don't know what she's doing to the Cheetah, but it ain't dancing.
Haters.
I would argue the scenes that we see her in the Cheetah, she is indeed dancing because she is given a hell of a performance at the Cheetah. Like if I saw a stripper work in the pole the way that she does, I would be inclined to tip quite a bit.
Well, it's like after she gets to her first dance and she's like soaked in sweat, I was like, I believe it. She was working real hard on that pole.
Well, of course, dancing is like so hard. It's one of the most
Yes.
strenuous jobs, apparently. I mean, it makes sense. I think if I saw a dancer dancing like that now, I would tip a lot because it reminded me of Elizabeth Berkley in Showgirls.
Right.
But that's not typically the dancer I tipped the most. I feel like probably wouldn't find a dancer dancing like that. Not anywhere now, but
no, and it is I think, and in terms of Hollywood dancing, like, you know, because we had Hustlers come out last year, and like Jennifer Lopez's like introductory scene where she's doing that dance. Like, I think that's the kind of like maybe high quality dancing that you would normally see at a strip club, or
that's classy shit.
Yeah.
I think it's black shit. I think that people figured out how black strippers were dancing, how brown strippers were dancing, how dancers with like body were dancing, and now that's like the popular dances that you see in music videos, or like Hustlers was not going to bring in people who were not dancing the way they dance at like a big Atlanta strip club, because that is like the cultural setter of all of like most pop hits that you hear, like major hip hop anthems, like those start in the strip club. And you are not going to see the cheetahs in Showgirls. I don't know that we would find a place like that anymore.
Well, I think the Big Mama character is the most perplexing to me because she's used for comic relief, but and maybe I love the
oh dang.
I love the character. I love her, and I love the genuine friendship that she seems to have with Nomi. Like even later when she comes to see her at the the Stardust. But the movie does play her as comic relief, and I also am confused by what the Cheetah presents as in the terms of the dancers that it gives you, and then they have this comedy act in the middle with like a boob pop out dress.
Yeah, well, she's fat, so they can't like.
It's
she's
very
not, like,
burlesque. Yeah.
She's not like you're not here to be sexy. Like obviously you're the comic fat relief. You're like the old hag fat lady. What they don't know is that I'm sure she had her customers, and I'm sure people were still coming there just for her. But I think in the movie, like she's supposed to be in like stark contrast to the other people. Although she's clearly the nastiest one there. Like,
oh my god, she's so great that way.
Love it.
She got lumps on her twat.
I love the joke where she's like, what is the useless piece of skin around a twat? Because you can tell that it's her winkingly
She's
making this
trolling
joke
them.
about how
Yeah.
stupid men are. And all the men are laughing like it's the funniest thing they've ever heard. And she's just like, you guys are all idiots. I am making fun of you right now.
Exactly. She's trolling all of them. She's like, I am excellent at my job and you don't even fucking know it. Like, that's how good I am.
Yeah. Which is funny though, because I imagine that there are people who watch this and misconstrue and think of her as a pathetic figure because she is older and fatter and not sexy. And you're like, no, you are missing the allure of Mama Bazoom.
That's life. That is, you know, we value bodies in that way all over the world. And so you're absolutely right that I'm sure that is completely lost on a lot of people.
I think particularly in 95 too, right?
Oh, God, yeah.
This movie equates sexiness with tight-toned flesh.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
That's why I love the Penny Hope character, because she's so naive and innocent.
Yeah. I love that character too.
Have y'all seen Showgirls 2, Penny from Heaven?
No.
I have not.
So I haven't either, and it's apparently a pseudo remake of this movie about the Penny character, and I want to say it's written, produced, and starring that actress who is Rena Riffle.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I've heard the production values are not great because she did make it herself, so I don't think she had a very large budget to work with, but it's always one of those things where I'm like, I love Showgirls so much. I should try to give my money to this other product, because she clearly loved Showgirls so much that she wanted to tell more stories in this world, which is like not something you would normally see with a cult film like this.
Yeah, I mean, it came out 16 years after Showgirls did. Oh, yeah, she actually directed it too. So she wrote it, directed it, produced it, and starred in it.
Wow.
So there's your female-directed Showgirls movie.
There we go. Yeah. Okay, so speaking of dancing, the girls decide that they will blow off the cheetah so that Nomi and Molly can go to the Crave Club. And this is where they meet bouncer James Smith, who is played by Glenn Plummer. And he accuses Nomi of teasing his dick with her dancing. So she initiates a fight. She goes to jail. He bails her out. And then they have an exchange, which is entirely life mottos in the form of t-shirt slogans. Life sucks. Shit happens.
Yeah.
Nay, what do you think of this James character?
I think most movies have a character that does stupid shit because this like person they're interested in is attractive. And it's like, I know that if someone got me fired from like several jobs, that I would probably not try and be picket with them. Like, it's probably not that serious. I don't understand like the point of him in this either. I mean, I guess we feel that way about a lot of things, but
well, no, but like I think his subplot is probably the most unnecessary in the film because he doesn't really. I don't even think he serves a purpose in the film. His courtship with Nomi is done after one scene. Courtship. I guess he bails her out of jail. I mean, yeah, courtship, if we want to call it that.
He does. He takes her out for burgers. Come on.
But like, I mean, again, you've got this 2 hour and 11-minute movie. You can remove those scenes with him and fill it with something else, or just not fill it.
Well, I think the intention is that he is the honest character in this movie. Everybody else is telling lies. No, like if you think about it, he is always unabashedly very clear and straightforward that he wants to fuck Nomi. You know, he may say like, I think that you have talent that I've never seen before, but he does legitimately think she's a good dancer.
But he says the same thing to Penny and also tries to hide Penny from Nomi until she hears Penny in the room.
Well, that's because he has a problem with pussy, Trace.
Oh, yeah. I wrote that line down. Always have and always will.
Yeah, relatable.
But he's...
I feel like he's honest in that he wants to fuck people, but like men are honest about that all the time. It takes like nothing for them to be honest about that. He's kind of dishonest about a lot of other things. And he may like think someone has talent genuinely at some point, but mostly I feel like he uses it as a vehicle to fuck.
Right.
It's like all these random stories and subplots, it seems like they could be cut out and the movie would basically be the same. I do think it helps us understand probably how relationships that Nomi has with all kinds of people
Right.
and how they go in all kinds of different directions. Usually she gets people into some trouble, but also that she is capable of feeling a lot and expressing a lot.
Maybe that's because I was about to say that everything that's done in the James subplot, like in his relationship with Nomi, is already accomplished in what happens between her and Zach. But I guess maybe it's to show her with a quote unquote everyman who's not like a corporate white bigwig.
Yeah. It's important that she starts and ends the movie without men, right? Like she has this Jeff character who drives the car, but he's an imbecile. It's always about her trusting herself and her instincts and making better connections with females because the men are all assholes, regardless of whether they're high profile, executive directors at a, hotel or a wannabe dancer / choreographer bouncer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's move on. So we've met all the people at the Cheetah. I do love the line, nobody wants to fuck a penny. I do tell that to Brian all the time whenever he's driving me mad. Brian, nobody wants to fuck a penny.
Do you steal any of the sex lines for your sex life?
Oh, obviously. Yeah. I'm regularly asking people if they can walk. Which is more or less where we're at. So Nomi discovers that Crystal and Zach have arrived to watch her show. They're sitting in the front row at the Cheetah. And Al... Oh, we haven't talked about Al. So Al is the owner of the Cheetah. He is played by Robert Davey. He's such a weird character. He's also kind of terrible, but he's also a secret softie? ?
Kind of? I mean, is the last time we see him when him and Mama come to see her at the Stardust? Is that the last time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess maybe that's the movie's way of being like, yeah, he's not that bad. I guess.
It's like his life is just mired in terrible sexual exploitation. So of course he would think it's a compliment that not getting cum on your face is like, you've moved up in the world.
Yeah.
The bar is low. The bar is low. Yeah, like I'm sure he's not the worst club owner ever, but
he ain't great.
He still ain't shit. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, let's put it this way. If this was striptease, he would be telling the girls to get into a mini pool filled with cream corn and do cream corn wrestling. Okay. So it could be worse.
I'm sorry, but I love striptease a lot.
I think Showgirls thought that it was going to be The Prestige, and striptease actually knows what it wanted to be, and it's maybe not a good movie, but at least it's more honest about its aspirations.
I think with striptease is, so it came out the year after this, and after this flopped so hard, like they strategically tried to market it in a way that was different than Showgirls and say, look, we're not Showgirls. Mm-hmm. I think the problem is a lot of the because striptease is very much a satire that is based on a novel that is satirical.
Right.
And I think people don't think the satire is effective. So that's a movie that is trying to be funny and people didn't find it funny. Whereas this is a movie that supposedly wasn't trying to be funny and people did find it funny.
Which is maybe why people liked Hustler so much, because it was actually aiming to do something and hitting what it was aiming to do.
And still funny.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that movie's also a lot darker than people realize.
It is, 100%.
Okay, so Al negotiates a private dance with Crystal and Zach and Nomi, and this is where we are first introduced to Nomi's machine cycle writhing as she brings Zach to climax as both Crystal and James watch.
I have respect for Berkley for doing this. I really do. I don't know what it is.
It is a go for broke performance.
It is.
We will never see this on screen again, so we should acknowledge a once-in-a-lifetime performance.
But Nay, do you find that her moves, I don't know if I want to even say good. What do you make of these moves?
So it's like, everyone's got their thing. I don't want to,
yuck anyone's yum.
I don't want to yuck anyone's yum, for sure. And when I think about the scene in terms of just Crystal watching, I guess it's not her man, but it's kind of her man. get a dance and get off from this like gorgeous sex worker, like that in my mind is really hot. Like that,
Yes.
when I'm not thinking about Elizabeth Berkley's moves or like any of those other things.
Mm-hmm.
So the scene isn't like not hot to me because it's hot, but it's not particularly all the things that Nomi's doing that are hot. But Nomi is hot at a baseline, so it's not
Right.
not hot. You know,
But it's like it's like the voyeuristic aspect of what Crystal's doing that's hot to you.
Yes. No, that's hot. It's hot from like every single person in that scene. I'm like, whether it's Nomi or Crystal or what's his name. I'm like every position, Zach, every position in that is hot to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I love it. Nay, you're like, I can't even remember a guy's
Whatever
name
that
because
dude's
he's
name
just not important.
he's not the folk, but even him, even being in his position, would also be just fine. I'm like, it's hot. She paid $500 for it. I'm like, all of that is hot, you know?
That actually is something I would have liked to see, because I'm obviously a big focal point of this movie, outside of Nomi's rise to fame, quote unquote, is the relationship, both romantic and antagonistic, between her and Crystal. And I find that those, I mean, as we've already mentioned, those are the most fascinating scenes in the film, and that we don't get more of them. I feel like we get enough to know what it is, but I would have liked to see more of that, as opposed to, again, say, the James stuff.
Yeah, it's almost like they didn't realize how well Nomi and Crystal play off of each other. Like Berkley and Gershon, when they're on screen together, it's like the film just fucking comes alive. And even in its more ridiculous moments like this, basically this entire scene is about the power play between the two women. Zach is furniture. He is literally just something for Nomi to writhe on.
Yes.
And that's why I kind of appreciate that James says, like, you fucked those people. And she's like, I didn't fuck them. I just gave them a dance. And it's like, no, she absolutely fucked these two, but she mostly fucked Crystal.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think it's also like, what am I trying? It's so, there's like so much going on. So there's all these implications made about like what the girls actually do at Cheetahs. And Nomi's very much like, no, of course, like that's not what I'm doing. But it's like sex work, well, because it's not legal, people aren't able to do it safely if they don't have a lot of privilege and access, right? So it's like Nomi has to like do this dance. She didn't want to. You know, the money kept upping, and her boss is basically like, oh, that much money? You have to do this. And so it's like, when she goes to give the lap dance, I've never gotten off from a lap dance in the club. I have never had enough money to make that happen. Like that, it's like, that is not what anyone should expect from a lap dance.
Yeah.
You know?
The few times I've had lap dances, I wound up like just talking to the stripper. Like I would get like a lap dance. I'm sorry, the dancer. I would get the dance for about a minute and then just kind of talk to them for a bit, because I kind of enjoyed talking to them more. But obviously, you know, me.
Well, I'm not saying it's not like hot and I'm not turned on. I'm just saying that like the point of get like if I go to a strip club and I get a lap dance, like I'm not expecting an orgasm like that. Like that is like a whole other negotiation and process that I would never expect from a lap dance. And so it's interesting that I think these really important points were made. You know, it's like Crystal has enough money to actually make that happen. And I know no one is speaking to the fact that a lap dance with an orgasm should absolutely cost $500 instead of the like original like measly amount that you threw out there.
Right.
Because I would have been really, really hot if like pissed off hot if, you know, her boss. I mean, it's not okay that someone is like, you have to go do this because someone's gonna pay a lot of money for it. But like, let's say Nomi got to like consent to that. I'm glad. I wouldn't wanted her to have consented to that for like $40 or like whatever their opening price.
Well, yeah. And we learn later that she was charging $50 for this performance, right? Like back when she was hooking, quote unquote, on the road.
Sometimes 100, but yes.
It's interesting too, like this film only features 2 sex scenes, and they're both between Nomi and Zach. And this is considered the non-consensual one because she, as you said, Nay, she's forced to do this performance. it isn't negotiable because this is her job and she'll get fired. Al has repeatedly said, I will fire you if you keep fucking up. So she has to do this, and then she gets paid in the 500. And of course, Al is such an idiot. He doesn't understand why she's not happy that she just made so much money, and why isn't she celebrating? And it's like, because men are stupid. But it's weird that we get a repeat performance that's almost identical, but it's removed of financial considerations, but then Zach turns it into a financial transaction when he then trades the sex post-coital for the news about the audition. Zach he can't ever just have fucking sex. He always has to turn it into a financial transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I should go back and say that scene between Zach and Crystal and Nomi, when I say it's hot, well, if you're like turned on from a movie, like that is a fine and normal reaction.
Yeah.
But in the context of consent, like it is clear that Nomi did not want to like have to go do that and be involved with Crystal and Zach in that way. But
no, I'm not gonna contest that. Nope, not gonna dip my toe in that.
There's like a lot to tease out because we don't know if Nomi, like, they negotiated a dance. So like no one talked about like what does this dance include. So we don't know if Nomi just like didn't want to be with those particular people, didn't want to give a dance at that exact moment, like what was going on. There was no conversation about this $500 includes like you getting this person off. Like we don't know if Nomi decided to do that like as the dance.
Like if that was her end goal, is to get him off, or yeah. I
don't know. Like I don't know if it was like an expectation that was already set up.
Right.
Like I don't know if she didn't want to be around them, but like to make Crystal mad and actually like didn't mind flirting with Zach. Like I don't know. Like I don't know any of those things.
Because the animosity is between her and Crystal, I always read it as, oh, okay, you're going to force me to do this? Fine, I'm going to fucking get your man off right in front of you.
Yes, and that's the part I'm obsessed with. Yes, when I see it that way, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah.
But on the flip side, though, that turns Crystal on. If we read it that way, then it's okay, she's doing this to get back at Crystal, but not realizing that that's exactly what Crystal wants. Because I never for 1 second believe that Nomi is smarter than Crystal in this movie.
No one is smarter than Crystal. Crystal, Crystal is a bad bitch. Like
she's the best.
I mean, it's Gina Gershon, so you like already feel that. Like when I saw it, it was before, it came out before Bound, so it's like I feel like the Gina that I think of now is like extreme bad bitch because of like all of the things that followed. But it's like if I'm just watching Showgirls off the top of the head, I'm not necessarily convinced that Gina's as bad as we're supposed to think she is until like time really progresses and you see what happens. And I think especially when Gina's like, you know what? I did some shit like that too. Here's my sexy ass hat. We're going to make out. Like, that's it. You're like, oh my God. Icon. Like, what?
It's so weird, right? Like, are we meant to believe... And just as a sidebar, I'm going to suggest that we just kind of ditch the plot recap and just like talk about this movie because I think we're having better conversation than if we just go.
No,
don't apologize.
I think that's totally fine because any podcast can go through and like joke about the scenes, scene by scene. That's what people do.
Okay. Yeah, because Nay, I think you're bringing something far more interesting than what we would have had if we were just doing like, let's talk about the first sights.
Yeah.
I'm really bad at sticking like, if you listen to Queerwolf ever, we're kind of bad at sticking to the movie. So I'm sure I brought that energy. I was like, well, let's talk about something else.
But that's okay.
We welcome your chaotic energy, Nay.
Yes, I feel that camaraderie with Nomi in terms of like just slightly chaotic, a little manic kind of survivor energy. I'm like, yeah, relatable. Definitely relatable.
Mm-hmm. But I get the impression that that's also what drives less of the conflict and more of the mutual admiration / distrust / hatred between Nomi and
Crystal.
Thank you. Part of the problem with the film is that it keeps all of these cards about these women too close to its chest until the very end. It would have been an interesting film to have known a little bit more about, like, we're given hints of what has happened to Nomi. We don't get any indication that Crystal has gone through something similar until the end when it's revealed, like, yeah, she also climbed her way to the fucking top.
I'm so conflicted about Crystal's final scene because on one level, I feel like it's such an about face. Like we see hints of that from her throughout the film, but it's such like oh yeah, I don't really want to be famous anymore. I'm done. That always kind of left a weird taste in my mouth because it felt like lazy screenwriting to me. But at the same time, I enjoyed seeing finally these two women connect. And granted, of course, we actually see it with their kiss, which is great, but also kind of reeks to me sometimes of, again, men writing lesbians like, look at the women kiss, it's so sexy, right? Which it is.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's a lot of back and forth between their rivalry versus their romance together that never makes that final scene ring fully true for me, at least in the sense that where Crystal's like, I'm fine, I'm good. I mean, I guess unless like we're to believe, oh, she got the settlement, so it's fine. Like maybe that is the point, that she gets a settlement, so she's like, I'm set for life. I don't know what point I was trying to make with that. Sorry.
I think you brought up a couple of interesting points. Like, one is the way that the relationship between the two women is played as animosity, but then, of course, we can also read it as romantic, and the question of whether or not this is meant to be titillation for straight male viewers. Like, can we still appreciate it knowing that that's what it was maybe intended to be? And then the other piece being that Crystal, she's a bit of an entrepreneur in that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
She is willing to maybe take the settlement and just relax into retirement or some other kind of like more low stakes gig, if only because she's paid her dues, but also does it feel satisfying because of who the character is? Don't we want more from Crystal?
Nay, I actually have this question for you. So going into the whole, okay, well, it's men doing this to titillate men. I agree with that sometimes, but then I'm like, okay, but it's also, they have the input of the two women who are participating in this scene who are also doing this. Whenever it's like, oh, the exploitation of women, I'm also like, and I'm not trying to throw blame on the women, but I'm also saying like, well, okay, hopefully the women have some kind of input as to how they're portrayed. Obviously, that's not always the case. In this particular film, based on the way that the filming is discussed, at least from what I've read, it feels like it was a very collaborative experience. And so I feel like that while you could read this as, yeah, it's just Verhoeven getting his rocks off to two women being with each other, I also feel like the performances of Berkley and Gershon like add to that, to where it doesn't just come across as just that.
Well, several things that I think about this particular thing. One, I feel like the Nomi Crystal, like, do I want to fuck you or do I want to be you kind of energy is just so queer. Like, queer people experience that all the time. I definitely experience that with beautiful fucking humans where I'm like, do I want to be you or do I want to fuck you? Is it both? And I kind of just like, or both. And it's like, it manifests differently in this film, of course, but there are a lot of things that men have made for themselves that other people have luckily been able to find joy in. And I think we should always take those moments when and where we can, whenever we want to, especially if it's going to like piss off the original man that made it. Like, that's definitely something to consider. But like, that happens all the time. I mean, it reminds me of a conversation I think I might have had with Michael on Queerwolf about Jess Franco films, and how obviously I love to see lesbian vampires regardless of who made it. But I also know that like, if a queer woman made it for the view of other queer women, it would be a far superior film. But like, I'm also going to watch this. So I think it's absolutely possible that at different times straight men have thrown things in for their own pleasure and entertainment. And not because of their good taste, but because women are beautiful and hot and gorgeous. The rest of us get to enjoy that regardless of who had the initial like idea or who produced it the way they did.
Right.
And in terms of like, if Elizabeth Berkley, like how much input she had, or like how the women in the film got to kind of like have agency in their role, like I don't know about those things, but I'm hoping that these women felt like they were getting paid, and in a world of capitalism, like hopefully that was at least enough for them. But I don't know. It's like it is a much larger question. It's a lot of, I guess, little questions, but I don't really know. It's complicated.
we can't possibly know. I mean, unless Elizabeth Berkley was on this podcast with Gina Gershon. Oh my God, could you imagine? Just talking about what they were thinking when they filmed all this.
Well, I think if you look at the documentary You Don't Know Me as well as the fallout, I would argue that I don't think Elizabeth Berkley had that kind of say. I think she was very much being manipulated by Verhoeven to deliver a certain type of performance. Gershon, I don't know. Gershon would have been more established at this point.
But Gershon isn't playing a character that is like Nomi.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to put myself in Berkeley's shoes here because it's like, okay, she's known really just for being Jessie Spano, you know?
Yeah.
A Saturday morning, like after school special show. That's essentially what that is. And it's her first big break film, and she's working with a highly renowned director. I mean, we've got RoboCop, Total Recall, Basic Instinct. I don't know about y'all. I even think about when I get a job that's good, and like I'm like, okay, but I feel inferior. It's like that imposter syndrome complex. No, it's just imposter syndrome. So you think that anyone who is a superior to you is right. Like you don't feel comfortable saying, no, I disagree, because you're like, well, no, this person has this job for a reason. They have all this fame for a reason because they're right all the time. So yeah, I can see that Verhoeven saying, oh yeah, act erratic as fuck. It's totally good. She's not going to question that, you know, because of where she's coming from and what she's trying to achieve. Also in the sense that like, I bet you people said this is a criticism of Hollywood and like it's a satire of like the system of Hollywood. You don't, I mean, again, I don't agree with this, but you don't talk back to the big man director, you silly woman, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that almost plays out in the film, right? All of these opportunities for Nomi to clap back against the people who are trying to like challenge or diminish her, they always end up resulting in failure when it comes to men, right? Like I'm thinking of how she gets recruited to go to this terrible boat show, which you can see coming a mile away is just a terrible idea. And she ends up dressing down Phil, who is played by Greg Travis, and she tries to get him fired, right? Like she does all the right things. She removes herself from the situation when she's uncomfortable. She goes to her supervisor, the man that she thinks she can trust. She tells him, I've been taken advantage of. You know, we were talking about consent and how much was paid for earlier at the cheetah scene, and it's the exact same situation, right? Like she was told, come to the boat show, $1,000. She even says like, that's it. And he's like, yeah, it's easy money. That's it. And then she tries to get Phil fired, and Zach fake fires Phil. And then they have a laugh about it. It's like, this isn't even satire. This is just reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually always wonder what Zach's endgame was too, because I never understood. I guess maybe it's just because he wanted to wait until he could fuck her, because I never understood why he didn't just tell her from the get. Like, when she went to go complain to him, like, why even go through the ruse of fake firing Phil? Why like pretend to be on her side? What's the point of that? But I guess it is just so he can keep her around long enough until he can have sex with her.
Just like constant manipulation.
Or yeah, maybe that's it. You know what? That's really funny because it's exactly what my husband said when I asked him the exact same question today. He was like, he just likes to manipulate people. It's like the sex is fun for him, but he's just a man in power who gets off on being powerful. He gets off on manipulating this woman who he views as less than.
Which is interesting, right? Because, okay, so let's take a look at the men in this film. So we've talked a little bit about Al, how he's a bit of a simpleton, but a little bit candid, but he's in fairly shallow water, I think you said, Nay. And then we've got James.
Well, I was just going to say that, no, I was going to bring it back to James because, you know, you're saying, oh, James is the realest one, whereas I would say that while Al is the most despicable one, he is the realest man in this movie in the sense he doesn't like fuck around. Like he says this is what it's like. In his monologue to Penny when he's talking about the blowjobs and the cum and the whatever, that's the most honest any man is in this movie. Which is really sad.
Terrible.
But it's true.
Yeah, the thing about Al, it's like, you know, in general, men just said things like, I'm going to make you suck my dick. Or like, not that Al said that exactly, but you know, if men were just like all talk, then, you know, men could say a lot more things without like me whooping their ass. But it's like, no, actually men will just make you suck their dick or like they'll murder you. So it's like, okay, maybe Al's like, because he never really, or we don't see him follow through on these different things. It's like, maybe he's just like a dirty old man who like talks a lot of shit. And dirty old men who talk a lot of shit on their own, it's like, okay, the threat level is low, but that's just not the history and the narrative of men in general. It's like, you're still fucking disgusting, dude. But
Right.
it's like, in comparison, on the spectrum of men, because the bar gets placed so low, we're like, you're not that bad.
Yeah.
And I mean, bear in mind, I'm not defending Al here, but I'm just saying, like,
No,
he at least,
yeah.
He often feels like he's posturing, right? When Nomi quits, he's like, better not come back here looking for your job, because I won't even give it back to you, even if you do give me a blowjob. And you're just like, ow.
You're like, Al, you would give her job back no matter what. Shut up.
She would walk back in here and you would be like, hey, you're back. Welcome. Thanks.
Well, because she's the best dancer. Like, she is the best dancer that he has, we're to believe.
This is true. But yeah, so then we've got James, who we've had a fairly extended conversation around. And then we've got people like Phil and Zach, and they're basically people who think that they're sharks, and they're actually just very sad and manipulative. Actually, you know what? I'm going to say the best man in this film is uber prick producer Tony Moss, who is played by Alan Ratchins.
Yeah.
He is the guy who auditions Nomi for Goddess, and he is a terrible human being, but he absolutely owns it, and he doesn't make overtures, apart from the very creepy line about, I'm erect, why aren't you erect?
Was Dharma and Greg after this?
I mean, way to follow that up, Trace.
I'm just imagining, like, going from this to Dharma and Greg.
Do you have a reel that we could watch of your previous performance? Yes, here's me offering ice to Elizabeth Berkley's tits.
Dream job.
But no, I might be inclined to agree with you on that, because yes, much like Al, he makes no designs about being anything other than what he is, and he makes no designs about the job being anything other than what it is. He doesn't, forgive the phrase, pussyfoot around.
Right. I mean, I think I appreciate... I think the reason that I like Tony Moss is that he also actually doesn't seem to have any overtures about the women. Like, when he says he's interested in the show, like his reputation is tied to the quality of the show, that really is all he seemingly cares about. He doesn't seem to want to sleep with the women. He's interested in their fuckability because he is trying to sell them as part of this attraction that will make the hotel money.
Right. Yeah, he's an entrepreneur through and through. He states, as you said, that he is erect when he makes them take their tops off, but it's not even like a sexual erection. It's like, it's a boner for the show almost. like this is, you'll do this well for the show. You'll make the show this much better. So I don't know.
I mean, I would argue I think it's still an erection for...
Definitely. Definitely still an erection. Yeah.
I will say that moment that he walks down the line and just picks out all of the women's flaws for the most arbitrary of reasons, though, that is why I'm like, oh, well, I could never be an actor, or I could never move to Hollywood, because I just could not deal with that level of rejection at such a facile level.
But that to me is one of the most satirical scenes of the movie that actually does feel like a critique of the Hollywood system. The whole thing with the show in general, because I mean, again, they're auditioning for the chorus line, which it's so funny because like every time I watch this, I always think about the Broadway musical, A Chorus Line, which is like a really, really, really good musical. But even watching this, when I'm watching the show, which I'm really not quite sure what Goddess is.
Oh, this show looks like hot garbage. Can we all just put that on the table? This would be an awful show to go and see.
I don't even mind that, because I do like the choreographed dancing. My issue is always that, like, okay, you have a star, Crystal, who makes an appearance, like a grand entrance in each musical number, but then just joins the chorus line. So that's always been my issue, is like, how is she the star? Like, does she have lines? Does she speak? I don't think so. But again, when you have Verhoeven saying he wants to make this big MGM musical, and so they have these lackluster musical numbers, that also I can see how you would view that as like, yeah, this is a critique on like silly Hollywood productions or something. I don't know.
Yes. Actually, Nay, have you seen The Fan with Lauren
Yes.
Bacall?
They covered it, I think.
We did.
I think of like Lauren Bacall doing that Stars and Diamonds number where you're just like, this is terrible. And then we apply this to a Vegas showgirl.
Oh my God. God, I love it.
Like, imagine Crystal coming out and being like, Stars and Diamonds.
You are gay.
Only topless.
Only topless. Oh, imagine. Never mind. Never mind.
See it through, Nay. See it through.
But
No.
but I do think that explanation of like, oh, like you can become, I mean, that's always the big critique with, not the only critique of this movie, but is like the conceit that you can become famous as a Vegas showgirl in this show that can again get Janet Jackson or Paula Abdul, but they're going for, you know, Crystal Connors and Nomi Malone.
Mm-hmm.
I've just never understood, like there's nothing here, and so it's either just Esterhaus and Verhoeven being willfully obtuse, or
this is like the biggest critique of the entire film.
yeah, exactly. And you can choose to view it either way, of course, but I choose to view it as the critique because it's not good.
There's something funny too about the line that Zach has at the end of the film when he's trying to protect the Andrew Carver character, who I was joking with Trace earlier, Nay. I think that Andrew Carver is like a parody version of Michael Bolton. Like, what if Michael Bolton was a rapist?
Oh no.
I was trying to figure out what Andrew Carver like did, what because we know he's famous, but we don't really know why, except that he gets a Vegas show for no discernible reason. There's apparently a villains wiki, and
Shut up.
he has his own entry. His occupation is entertainer. His powers/skills, I think this is usually used for like superheroes, is singing, natural leading, and fighting. His hobby is smoking. His type of villain is wealthy rapist, and his goals get whatever he wants from a woman, even if it means brutally rape her. And then in parentheses it says failed. But I'm really confused by that because he does rape Molly, but I guess he failed at getting what he wants because Naomi beats him up.
I'm like, I'm sure he continues to go do the same thing over and over again.
100%.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the critique too, right? Though is that this cycle of abuse, of this pattern of abuse from this man is going to continue to happen no matter what. Naomi doing that isn't going to affect him at all, except put him out of work for a few weeks while his bruises heal.
Well, and that's almost the worst part of this, right? She does it like she's doing it for Molly, but really that doesn't bring Molly any satisfaction. It doesn't help Molly to recover. You know, the biggest benefit is Zach's terrible statement that he'll buy her a dress shop or something.
Mm-hmm.
You have to hope that this is part of the critique because it's so awful that women can just be cast aside so horribly while men literally suffer no consequence apart from like a kick to the face.
You know, I will say though, when I think about like what should happen to rapists,
mm-hmm.
what I would want to happen to my own rapist. Like when I think about defunding the police and drastically rethinking the prison industrial complex, I'm like, would I be satisfied? Well, if my friend had introduced me to someone who then, you know, gang raped me,
Ugh.
what would satisfy me in that moment? Like, would my friend absolutely beating just one of the people's ass do it? No. If my friend maybe beat all three asses, we're getting there. We're getting there. And I feel like if that could be guaranteed to happen to every single person who does not get consent to physically do something to someone else, if that was like the general standard, like you could guarantee that would happen, that would be pretty great. Like that might actually have impact, because obviously policing doesn't have that kind of, like, that's not what happened.
Right.
The police don't prevent crime. You call them after it happens, maybe, if you're someone who does that. So it's like, it's interesting that Nomi had to do that because she wasn't allowed to contact the police. But we don't know if Molly would have wanted it reported. You know, lots of folks choose not to go through that process because reporting to the police can be just as violent as like
Yeah.
some of the things you've just gone through.
Right.
We don't know. Like we don't know what Molly would have wanted. I definitely think Nomi should have beat up the men outside of the room as well, and not
Yeah.
just Carver. But
I think that's a
yeah,
problem too, though, is with how the film just kind of leaves Molly. Like after she's raped, we see her first borderline comatose, and then we do see her again when Nomi says, "I kicked his ass," and then abandons her, and she kind of
Mhm.
like mumbles a little bit, but like we don't get anything from Molly post rape, which is I mean, obviously the rape itself feels out of place tonally with the rest of the film, which is a
right.
problem in and of itself, but that we get no closure for this character. Well, the problem is that Molly's closure for her own rape is served via Nomi, and so it is kind of like Nomi's closure as opposed to the actual rape victim's closure.
Oh,
Yes,
100%.
absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
definitely Nomi's closure. That whole like montage is Nomi's closure. She's like, all right, I gotta whoop his ass. I gotta see her in the hospital. I gotta go see her in the hospital, and then I'm leaving town because
Yeah.
I've accomplished everything I came to do. It's definitely about Nomi.
Yeah. She said goodbye to the people that she cared about the most.
But she doesn't care
Mhm.
about her enough, because if you were really her friend, you would stay with her by her in her hospital bed and like see
Mhm.
her through this.
100,000%. I always wondered, like, do you think Carver, like, if Nomi had responded to his advance, like, do you think that's what would have happened to her that night?
Oof. I think so.
Yeah, like, because if he's like, I like your butt, call me, or whatever he said, I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't tell if it was just like literally a thing of opportunity. I mean, who knows? But ugh, gnarly.
Well,
That scene is so fucking disgusting
Yeah.
and awful.
well, its
Yeah.
presence just shows that Molly exists in the film solely to be raped. That is what that scene does, to me at least.
Yeah, and it's like, how dare you bring such a brutal rape into a storyline and have it not be as part of like the violence brought against sex workers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's like so many things left out, of course, about sex workers and sex workers' opinions, but yeah.
I almost wonder if they feel like, oh, this is a natural trajectory based on the stories that we heard from sex workers when we were conducting our interviews with those like 200 women. But then they didn't want to give that narrative to Nomi because it makes her a quote unquote victim. So they then introduce this other character whose role is to be victimized so that they can still represent it, but they don't have to lose, the powerful arc of their main character, which is
Mm.
gross.
I do have Verhoeven's statement on the rape scene.
Oh,
So
yes.
his reason for I mean, again, he didn't write it, but here it is. He said, nearly every character in the movie is a bad person except for one girl, Molly, and she is the one who gets raped. Molly is the only really genuinely supportive person, and she is punished. The reason I did this, which again, he didn't write the script. The reason I did this was to show that Vegas is not a nice place, and that is basically what the movie is all about. It is possible Showgirls was lacking in closure. Even some of my closest collaborators felt that way and have said they thought the rape scene took the fun out of the movie.
One of the things that I just find so frustrating, and more so whenever I rewatch the film, like the first time you watch this, it feels like this comes out of nowhere. And then when you watch it on subsequent viewings, you see that there's a deliberate edit in here. So we get the implication that Molly is going to be raped, and then we cut, and then we go back and we see more of it, and then she comes out and like stumbles onto the ground. We didn't need the second part of that. The implication was
Right.
clear. We didn't need her stumbling out and bleeding. It's so overdone, it's almost crass.
Well, what's interesting about that is that everyone would have noticed that night who the like most famous person at the party was with. Everybody would have
Yes.
known that she was with him, and to see her stumble out from where she had been with this person, bleeding, clearly having been assaulted, and for no one else to contact the police, and for no one else to like make assumptions that it was this person and like immediately storm Carver and see what's up, whether it was a deliberate choice or not. It is interesting that the only revenge that comes is because Nomi seduces him and then whoops his ass. It's interesting.
You can argue that as the critique too, because I asked myself the same question, especially when Molly goes out onto the floor and she's beaten to a pulp. It's like, okay, well, obviously this is easily traceable back to Andrew Carver. Like, it's not
Right.
hard to see like who did this to her. And I think that is the critique, especially in the conversation we get with Zach in the next scene. But I think it's presented so poorly. Like, again, I get the intent here, but the intent doesn't come through in the execution for me.
Right.
It's also, I mean, not to say that a rape scene needs to be like, but like when they do it, they're just yelling pussy as they fuck her. And it's just not, I don't know how you quote unquote tastefully portray a rape scene, but this is not the way to do that. It doesn't come across that way to me.
I mean, there is no tasteful.
Yeah.
There is no tasteful. And I actually feel like part of the brutality of that scene is like what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Alongside
Because it's
what
not
they're
pussy,
doing.
it's black pussy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that is specifically for me as a Black woman or as a Black person with a pussy and as a survivor of sexual assault. You know, it's a moment. It's a moment in that film. It's dark. It's disgusting. It's dark. It's hard to feel like, I think especially knowing that he's like, Molly's like the best person in the movie, and then like she gets punished for her proximity to Nomi.
Mm-hmm.
All of that is very hard and it's sickening. And I can tell that as a young person when I watched this movie that I was completely capsized by the titties and not all of these other things.
Okay.
But as a kid, I was also a survivor of sexual assault, you know, and I don't even remember having thoughts about that. I feel like I completely blocked out that part of the movie until I was an older person because it was that awful.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to do that given any background, almost because so much of the movie isn't tonally in line with that scene. I feel like a lot of people probably would rewatch this and, again, like you said, forget that scene is in there until it's about to happen or until it is actually happening in front of their eyes.
Yep. I've taken to skipping the rape scene when I rewatch it now. So when they get to the party and she goes up with Andrew Carver, I literally just skip to the next scene where she's in the hospital. The point has already been made about women's bodies and the commodification of them and the selling and exploitation. I don't need the film to take it to this degree where it's basically saying, oh, and it's not just that we're going to buy and sell women's bodies, we're literally going to take them by force and violence, like sexualized, racialized violence. I don't think the film benefits from this.
It's like no one needs to see that. No one's life is benefited by seeing brutal rape scenes. If there are rape survivors who find it useful to watch or like have literally any opinion whatsoever about it, then that is valid as, you know, as a person who has survived that. But it's like other people don't need to see that to know that rape is bad, disgusting, to know that racialized and sexualized violence is horrific. I really do hear you on that. And it's kind of how I felt about certain parts of 13 Reasons Why.
Oh,
it's like, I watch all kinds of shit at any time of day. Like, I don't need company. I don't need lights on. Like, things don't bother me for the most part, but there are certain things when it comes to like deeply sexual violence, any kind of violence, gratuitous violence, where it is motivated from hate and the other person not giving consent, where I'm like, I don't know that anyone really needs to see that. And I'm not someone who ever advocates for censorship or like some kind of morality in terms of what you should and shouldn't do. But I hear you about that particular scene. Like I don't ever need to see it again. I know that. And I will definitely watch this movie many more times in my life, but I will not watch that scene again.
Yeah. Okay.
Well.
It's hard to recover from that.
No, I mean, like,
I'm glad that we had this conversation.
Yeah.
Though. Like, I think that this is really important, if only because I have a feeling like a lot of people are going to listen to this episode. They're going to be really excited that we're tackling Showgirls because it's so funny and campy and there's so much to make fun of. And I'm more deeply appreciative of the conversations that we've had because I think they're more interesting and nuanced. Like, they're the parts of the film that deserve to be talked about that I think people gloss over in favor of dressing it down.
And I do think, though, that for having a special surprise episode on a film that isn't typically in our wheelhouse, like Showgirls, I think it fits that we change the format a bit. And also, Nay, because Joe and I have rightfully been criticized for, having a limited point of view because we are two gay, white, cisgender men. Two gay, yeah, that covers all the bases. And so I think this is something that we definitely needed someone to come in and give us a different perspective and lead us in this direction, because I think that's, like, honestly a really good way to handle it.
I mean, I couldn't live with myself if there was going to be a Showgirls discussion and we didn't talk about sex work, bodies, right? Like all of these things. And I'm not a sex worker, so I'm sure that there are a lot of things that could have and should have been talked about that I hope, people will fill in the blank with their own experiences and their own opinions, and to like help further educate us on that. But yeah, I was down to talk about it the moment Joe brought it up. I was like, absolutely. I feel like I get asked to talk about the same movies all the time. No one has ever asked me to talk about Showgirls.
There we go.
And I was so excited to do it.
So I have a question. Would you two have watched a hypothetical sequel set in Los Angeles?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was going to be called Nomi Does Hollywood, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I just don't know if they would have had any new ground to break, right?
Yeah, I find the general idea of like, oh, we're making this Oscar bait film, but also we have a sequel in mind for it, quite hilarious in and of itself. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess you just do it with her acting. I guess the film's version of the Cheetah would be her doing porn and then working her way up into maybe like a meta, like self-referential, like, oh, we're doing an Oscar movie thing. I don't know. I would watch it because why not? But I don't know what they would do.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're describing sounds exactly like what we would have gotten. And I don't know that I would have needed that. Although if there was an announcement that they were doing a like Nomi 20 years later kind of piece, it would be interesting to see where she would have been after the quote unquote looks and talent started to like fade. Like if you think about this as an All About Eve remake, what happens when she takes on the older role? That could have been interesting.
Yeah, I would love a like 20 years later, like where are they now? 20 years later, Nomi biopic where it's like this is exactly what, like, she retells the stories and it kind of like shifts back and we like get to see little bits and pieces, but it's all narrated by old Nomi. Because it would be amazing, because I know Nomi got into some serious shit, because every single interaction, every single person that comes into her life, it just always ends up with being a story,
And what's unfortunate is, though, if obviously we're going to pretend Showgirls 2 Penny from Heaven doesn't exist, and we actually got this like 25 years, this 25 years later legacy sequel with Gina Gershon and Elizabeth Berkley. The thing is, that would make money now. The problem is, A, I don't think Hollywood would ever believe that it would make money. No. And B, I don't think Elizabeth Berkley would ever come back to this property.
No, I think she's probably fine doing the conventions and the screening circuit, but I think she's had her fill of this.
Yeah.
I would watch the fuck out of like fake True Hollywood Story where it's like, where is Nomi Malone now? And it's just like a fry cook who's like shaking in their boots saying, every time she came in to order fries, I never knew what was going to happen.
And to bring it back to that You Don't Know Me documentary, because Joe and I, well, he'd seen it before, but You Don't Know Me screened at Fantastic Fest with Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. And watching those two documentaries like in the span of a weekend, it's kind of fascinating to see like, Mark Patton's journey of how he quote unquote killed the Nightmare franchise and how his career went downhill after all the homophobia, comparing that to Elizabeth Berkley's journey, her career path after this film. They're very, very similar, albeit, in different ways, but I don't know. I empathize with her so much, and I wish her the best. And I'm glad that they're doing the Saved by the Bell reboot, which is great, but I would like to see Hollywood embrace her, not re-embrace her.
Yeah, and maybe something that utilizes her in a more significant way than playing David Caruso's wife on a couple of episodes of CSI.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah!
All right. Well, this has been a really, really, really fascinating conversation. So thank you again, Nay, so much for joining us. Do you have anything you'd like to plug or talk about?
I mean, I have a couple really exciting things in development, but not anything I can talk about yet. I mean, you can always find me on the internet. Yeah, I think I'll have some really cool news not too far in the future.
Where can they find you on social media?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Black Cupcake, and that's BLAKKCUPCAKE. You can find my art Instagram through that. You can find my Patreon. Yeah.
Well, thank you again. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at Horror Queers, and join our Facebook Horror Queers group to hang out with other listeners. If you have a moment, please rate and review us on your podcatcher of choice. If you like Horror Queers merch, please check out our store at TeePublic. Just search for Horror Queers on teepublic.com. And if you want even more Horror Queers content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. This month we have new episodes on Antebellum, starring Janelle Monáe, which is currently available on Premium VOD, and Spiral, a new queer horror film currently streaming on Shudder. And of course, to pair with last week's episode on Urban Legend's Final Cut, we have an audio commentary on the original Urban Legend. Super fun, by the way. Joe, what are we covering next week?
All right, we're sticking with the anniversaries, but we're going to travel a little bit further back in time, and we're going to check out one of those films that you were talking about, Nay, which is the Lady Lesbian Vampires. So we're going to go all the way back to 1970 and check out the 50th anniversary of The Vampire Lovers.
Nice.
It's going to be a first-time watch for me. Is it a first-time watch for you, Joe? Right. And I do believe we have a guest on that one as well to bring in a non-male perspective.
Yes.
Thank God.
Can you imagine?
We do talk about lesbians without women.
No, we do. And we do. Not for lack of trying, but we do. But on that note, we can cross out Showgirls.
Yes, and cross out Horror Queers.
Bloody Disgusting Podcast Network, home of creepy, disturbing, and terrifying creepypastas, SCP archives, weekly full-cast storytelling, horror queers, genre commentary from an LGBTQ perspective, and the Boo Crew, for horror-centric interviews. Listen free wherever you stream audio and at bloodydisgusting.com/podcasts.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep, a podcast where I tell you spooky bedtime stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. Listen to Scare You to Sleep wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm. Sweet screams.